All right, friends, it's time to give you loyal listeners a discount on protein powder. You may or may not know, but I launched my very first protein powder 2 years ago. It's a grass-fed beef isolate with only 3 ingredients: grass-fed beef, either organic cacao or organic vanilla, and organic monk fruit. Now, if you don't want any of the added flavor and sweeteners, you can also just get unflavored. And no matter what flavor you choose, you're getting over 23 grams of protein per scoop, which is going to keep you full and satisfied between meals. I love starting my day with a Fab4 smoothie and breaking my fast with that much protein. It makes a serious difference in my cravings and blood sugar balance the rest of the day, and I've seen it with my clients as well. Now, I never thought I'd own a product company, but when I got pregnant with Sebastian, I realized the majority of protein powders were chemically extracted or enzymatically extracted, and I wanted to use heat and water only. I wanted minimal ingredients because we don't need those emulsifiers, fillers, or added vitamins, minerals, and probiotics. All of those additions increase the chances that it's not going to work for your body, whether it be bloating, digestion issues. I just wanted pure, clean protein to keep you full and satisfied so you could build the most delicious Fab4 smoothie. And I have to say, I'm pretty proud of the flavor. If you take a look at our reviews on Amazon, you'll see 5-star reviews for flavor. And that is key, because if you don't love your Fab4 smoothie and you don't love drinking your protein powder, you're not going to do it. It won't become a habit, and it's consistency that outpaces everything. So if you're here and you're listening and you want to give our protein powder a try, use the code podcast5 for $5 off your order. And let me know if you love it. My favorite ways to apply this protein powder is in my Fab4 smoothie, making freezer fudge, making chocolate milk, making hot chocolate, and throwing the unflavored into all my kids' baked goods. So let me know how you use it. Let me know if you love it, and share this podcast deal with your friends. Dr. Becky is a clinical psychologist and a mom of 3. She specializes in helping people cope with anxiety and stress, improve relationship satisfaction and communication, and manage work-life pressures. Dr. Becky has an expertise in parenting and child development. She equips parents with tools to strengthen parent-child relationships, decrease problem behaviors, and build more peaceful homes. Becky received a BA in Psychology and Human Development, summa cum laude from Duke University, and a PhD in Clinical Psychology from Columbia University. Dr. Becky maintains a private practice, runs parenting groups and workshops, lectures on various mental health issues, and consults for organizations. I have been looking forward to this conversation selfishly for a very long time, but I'm so excited to share Becky's tips with all of you. This is a great conversation. Thanks for tuning in.
Oh my goodness, Dr. Becky, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. I feel like I've been looking at my calendar, and I know we had to reschedule once, but looking and watching for your name, because I feel like this is going to be all the parenting advice I need in this stage of life. So selfishly, thank you for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. You've been in my house definitely longer than I've been in your house, because I've had your book long before I started an Instagram account. So this is really exciting for me too.
Oh, awesome. Well, before we get started, will you tell our audience what you do and who you work with, and sort of some of the advice that you're giving?
Yeah. So I am a clinical psychologist specializing in parenting, anxiety, and resilience. I am also a mom of 3. So my kids are 4, 7, and 10. And I really love thinking about all things kind of human relationships, and especially in terms of how we all operate in systems. And so families are kind of, one of the prominent systems we all operate in. So I love thinking about how we all develop things like attachment, birth order, sibling relationships, how we kind of maintain a partnership if we have a partner while we raise kids. And what I always come back to are kind of 2 core beliefs that I really believe all humans of all ages are inherently good inside, and that we're all doing the best we can with the resources we have available in that moment. And those 2 beliefs really allow me to be very curious about kids, because Kelly, if your kids are like my kids, or anyone listening, if your kids are like my kids, chances are they don't always do so many things that are so good on the outside. They hit, they struggle, they, don't listen. And so I come back to that idea, well, if kids are doing the best they can, and if they're good inside, then what skills are they missing? Then what needs are unmet? And that gap between the kind of goodness inside and often their less than ideal behavior on the outside is really where I love to live and kind of think about what's happening and what we can do about it.
Well, even just that mantra and that belief just makes me feel good on the inside as a parent, because you're like, that's exactly how I feel about my kids. I know that they're such a sweet, like I always say, my boys are sweet boys. They're sweet boys and they're loving boys. And then sometimes their behavior on the outside is not that. And it's not all the time, but it's also how am I showing up for them in those moments where they're not maybe acting out they're good on the inside, on the outside.
I think that's exactly right. And you know, that those two words, good inside, I actually think it's a big idea, but I actually often think it's one of our best strategies, honestly, with ourselves. And we can only think about a strategy with our kids if we're kind of using that same thing with ourselves. So for everyone listening right here, just to think about something they're usually hard on themselves about, and then to layer on, right, like I'm doing the best I can. Or even in that moment that I yelled at my kid, or that moment when I, slept past my alarm and missed this appointment I wanted to get to. If I'm good inside, if I'm doing the best I can with the resources I have available in that moment, then what was really going on for me? And we can really get much more compassionate and curious about ourselves and other people when we use that idea of good inside as an actual strategy, as opposed to what many of us usually do, where we layer on, I'm the worst parent, or I'm so lazy, or my kid is so irresponsible. We just judge. I can say these things because I do it. It's not like I don't do those things myself. Of course I do. But just trying to catch ourselves and come back to that internal goodness allows us, as you said, Kelly, to show up differently.
Absolutely. And what you said is you're trying our best with the resources we have. And what I love so much about you is that you're giving away, not only do you have like resources for parents and workshops, but you give so much of it away on Instagram, where I'm like, okay, sliding. I understand how I'm going to approach the situation differently. So I'd love to kind of unpack some of the stuff that you share and the education that you provide, this free, amazing education. So people should be following along. Dr. Becky Good Inside for people who aren't. But let's kind of talk about some of those challenging moments, and specifically maybe if it's a season where we're struggling with some behavior problems, whether that's biting or hitting. And we talked before the podcast started. For me, that right now, Sebastian's 3, and we live on a cul-de-sac right now, which is safe, but it's running in the street. And I feel like it ignites Chris's fuse to where I'm like, oh no, the bomb's going to go off. Because he's very fearful of Bash's safety. Like that's an issue for us. We're like, it can cause him to snap or us to feel scared and not act the way we should probably act when we see our 3-year-old sprint in the street. So what do we do? Tell us everything.
First problem to dive into, right? So, okay, first things first. I think I want to put out 2 terms, and we'll use that to ground our understanding, because just to even give full visibility into how I think about kind of struggles and what I would do in my private practice if I saw you there, is I would think, okay, first we have to understand, and then we can intervene. And that might sound obvious, but most people like to intervene and like not waste time on understanding. But interventions that aren't based in a good understanding of what's really happening to your kid is just grasping at thin air. Like no wonder it doesn't work, because it has no foundation. And when we try to understand, I really think what we need to kind of practice as a muscle is understanding from a most generous interpretation standpoint. I like use that as an acronym all the time, like MGI, because most of us do LGI, least generous interpretation. So your son, you probably told him a million times, don't run into the street, right? We tell our kids these things, and then he's running into the street. It is, for most of us, a reflex to go to the least generous interpretation, which probably sounds like my kid doesn't respect me, or my kid's just trying to mess around, or my kid doesn't, respect what I say, and I have to show my child that they need to respect, right? So not listening, I think, often gets interpreted through the least generous interpretation of my kid could do better, and to kind of gain power or some version of that isn't, right? So that's the first thing to notice, because if we have an understanding of what's going on for our kid from a least generous perspective, we're probably going to intervene from a very adversarial standpoint ourselves, right? Which sounds like yelling. It sounds like, how do I punish my child to know that they can't do this, right? And I mean, if we use ourselves as kind of the example, you have a husband, I have a husband, so I'll just say husband. But if like our husbands came at us with a problem from a least generous perspective, from a like, if you don't do this thing, Kelly, I'm going to punish you. I just can't imagine you'd be like, sure, honey, now I want to do that thing, right? Like, just because no one likes to be seen that way. So what's the most generous perspective? Well, this is what I think can always be a reframe for any behavior we label as defiant. That my kid has a strong urge to do something and they can't regulate that urge.
Yeah.
And maybe also they feel kind of unseen in that desire. So, you know what's more fun than holding your mom's hand when you walk outside? Running away. Like, it's just more fun, like for any of us, right? Again, I can't imagine your husband's Chris. I can't imagine you going outside. If you were walking further away from him, he's like, excuse me, Kelly, get back here and hold my hand. You'd be like, no.
I'm running from you now.
Like, I might not want to be doing that. So how can we use that to intervene? Well, my kid is missing a skill. They have some urge to run, to explore, which I would actually say is a really natural urge. We want our kids to explore. That's how they learn. But they haven't figured out how to inhibit that urge. Inhibiting an urge, and I'm sure you talk about this with people all the time in your work, is really hard. It's really hard to want something and stop your body from getting it, right? Or stop your body from expressing it. So an intervention with your son based on that understanding would actually look like approaching him from like a coach perspective, right? If you were a basketball coach and you had a player who was, not able to make a layup yet, you'd work with them on making the layup. You wouldn't punish them for not making a layup, right? So, hey, you know what I'm thinking about? When we go outside, you probably have this feeling in your body of wanting to like run. So fun to run. It's fun to like be free and kind of feel powerful. And yet my number one job is to keep you safe. And safety right outside our house means, and I don't know what it would mean. It means holding my hand, or it means being on the inside of me when we walk, or it means, standing right next to me, just to give something concrete. I think that's one of my favorite things to say. Right now, safety means, and then tell your kid what that means, and really tell your kid that's your job, because it is our job. More than keeping our kids happy, more than anything else, it's to first and foremost keep them safe. And so I'd go further. So let's say it was holding your hand. And so my number one job is to keep you safe. And right now, safety right outside our house looks like when we open the door, holding my hand. And here's where I'd add in that kind of seeing my kid. I know that's probably annoying, right? Like, is that a little annoying or really annoying? What would he say?
Oh, he'd tell us it's really annoying.
Yeah, exactly. It's really annoying. And then I'd probably play around with that. And I don't know if listeners can understand what I'm doing, but I would move my hands from like kind of close to each other. Like, is it this annoying? And then is it this annoying? And then I put my hands all the way out like, oh, it's that annoying. Why does that matter? Now I'm connecting to my child around a topic that usually we probably do feel fairly kind of pitted against each other about. When we add connection to replace kind of an adversarial approach, just like with our marriages or just like in a work environment, change becomes possible. So I'd probably play around with that. And then he's going to also see, oh, my mom like gets it. She gets that I don't want to hold her hand. When someone really gets that we don't want to do something, we're all more likely to do it, right? If anyone's like, I get you really don't want to go to my mom's for Thanksgiving this year. You really don't want to travel. I understand that. It's really not top of your list. Most of us would be like, I'll do it, no problem, right? Because there's no guilt, there's no shame, there's no bad person, there's just connection. So add that connection. So I think that's step one, is some version of my number one job is to keep you safe. Safety means this outside, kind of, and then connecting. I know that's annoying, or I know that's not what you want to do. And then I would take it a step further in terms of that coaching role, that skill building role. And I would say to him, look, I don't want you to hold my hand forever. I don't want you to be like 18 and we walk out of the house and you're like holding my hand. I have to put you in an 18-year-old stroller. I'd be so awkward. So we're going to practice. So whether you have a backyard, or to me, I live in New York City, I don't have a backyard. So it'd be like practicing in my house. Let's pretend we're going outside. Kids love when you role play in a ridiculous way because it's so absurd. I'd be like, okay, let's pretend we're going outside and you have to stay super close to me. And kids will probably cooperate. They'll be like, okay, right? But then I'd whisper, now let's pretend you have that feeling, like that running away feeling. Let's pretend you really have it. And I'd probably demonstrate a lunge, and I would lunge like, oh, like that. Oh, let's practice lunging forward and then coming back and holding my hand. Lunge forward, hold my hand. Because now we're actually creating a situation that mimics what we'd want our kid to do. A kid who wants to run away isn't going to go outside and not want to run away. The best we get is a kid who runs away, gets outside, recognizes they want to run away. The wanting to run away isn't a problem. The wanting to run away and not being able to inhibit the urge is the problem. So when again, we see that for what it's at, now we can actually practice at home. Then maybe after we did a couple practices, I'd say, look, we're going to go outside to the backyard, or we're going to go outside, and I'd be somewhere that was safer than for me would be, I wouldn't practice in the middle of the New York City street. Exactly. Wow, you did it. I think you're ready for the next step. And then let's say the first time I go outside my house where I'm really giving my kid more of this leeway, I'm going to say something like this. Look, I'm super excited. I think you're super ready for this. And I totally believe in you. And I just want to let you know, if it's hard to stay safe, I'm not going to say, if you run away from me, if you don't listen. I'm always trying to avoid an adversarial stance. If it's hard for you to stay safe, I will run after you and pick you up and bring you inside. There's not going to be a second chance today because we don't take second chances with safety, right? And you're not going to be in trouble, but we'll just go back to the practicing. So we're really staging this. There's no bad kid. There's no defiant kid. There's no power struggle. Mm-hmm. We're working as if it's me and my child against the problem instead of seeing my child as the problem, which is a huge difference.
I love that you said the least generous interpretation and the most generous interpretation, because I do see his running away from us in this scale. Like the least generous is, I think Chris feels like totally disrespected, like Bash doesn't listen to him and he wants to kind of alpha it. And I look at it and I'm like, he actually gets this kind of glimmer in his eye and he knows that you're going to give him 100% of your attention. And then you're going to chase him and he laughs the entire time. Like, I actually think he just wants you to play and chase him. And so we kind of had this conversation one night of like, okay, like, how do we tell Bash, if you feel like you want to play chase, where can we play chase? But and he's into it. And he's like, I want to play chase. And he'll tell us he wants to play chase. We'll go in the backyard and play chase. But he's still playing chase when it's time to go in. And chase happens to be that chase is him running down the cul-de-sac towards a fast moving street. And so that just, I love this because this is something that Chris and I can immediately practice in the house and see what he can do. I'd love for you to expand on the second chances piece and the boundary there, because I would say I really want to have strong boundaries and I want my word to be worth something. And sometimes I feel like I have a hard time doing that. Where,
you and so many, right? Because, and I think all types of people have a hard time setting boundaries, right? But I do think there's, gender patterns here where many women I know and I'm friends with were kind of raised to be good girls, or they were good, right, in quotes, which really just means people pleasing or attentive to what people want of us, not what we want for ourselves. That's really, I think we've realized in 2021, that's all it means to be a good kid, right? And as a result, the same patterns kind of get activated with our kids. Like it seems like, well, of course, I don't care if my kid is happy with me, but that's logic. But what happens in our body, in our circuitry is, oh no, I'm saying something based on what I need or what my role is. And someone else out there is putting up a fight. And if historically, one of the roles you had starting in childhood or starting through gender socialization was, oh, well, let me just do that thing because that's how I reach peace and safety, then you are going to have the instinct to, kind of go back on your word, but really just kind of take the easiest way out and probably change your boundary because that in some ways was the most comfortable practiced behavior for you.
Oh, I'm the first of three daughters. So
there you go.
So you're people pleasing oldest.
So you perfected that role. So and we really have to come at change from a deep appreciation perspective, because there's nothing we do that didn't come from a place of adaptation. Right? It's why actually I I tend not to love diagnosis. I really don't like the idea of like symptoms, like psychological symptoms, right? Oh, I have a hard time holding a boundary and I'm weak. No, what that means is it must have been adaptive early on to pay close attention to what made other people happy with you. You wouldn't, I don't know one baby who comes out of the womb thinking, I don't think I'm going to cry because I want my parents to think I'm easy. No, babies cry along the way. And at a extremely young age, they can learn to shift that. But no one started that way. We start as a ball of needs and wants and feeling very comfortable, releasing that to everyone. So starting with a place of appreciation before we even think about holding that boundary with your son would probably sound like somewhere like, thank you, people pleasing Kelly in there. Like you played a really important role for a really long time. You figured out what the family system kind of required and you were pretty crafty. It happens to be 2021 now and you're not as needed, but I always think to myself, like, thank you for your years of service. And, you don't need to kind of take over the CEO seat inside me anymore, but appreciate the years that you did. Right. And if we go back to the idea of like, our kids need to feel seen before they cooperate. Right. And I'm a huge internal family systems fan. The parts of us need to feel seen before they cooperate. Right. There's a whole system inside of us of a lot. Right. And so we usually approach different instincts in us with blame, with the least generous interpretation. Why am I so weak? Why can't I hold a boundary? As opposed to, well, how come I can't hold a boundary? There probably was a reason. And maybe I start from appreciation and seeing that thing inside me. And that's actually going to help you hold a boundary with your son. So going to what would I do after that more concretely? I'm a big fan of giving kids second chance. Let me just say that, right? I'm a big fan of giving ourselves a second chance too. But if I go back to my number one job is to keep my kids safe. If my kid just did something from a dysregulated place where they're in danger, physical danger here, but our kids get into an emotionally dangerous place a lot. Often they're just melting down. Like they're just totally out of control. I often imagine a kid, let's say like running into the street or doing something dangerous and a parent stops them and then kind of lets them go and does it. They often will do it again. And from a kid's perspective, for some reason, I often think of a kid saying, you're watching me be out of control and putting my life in danger. And my tantruming must be even scarier to you that you're willing to let me do this thing again just because you want to avoid a tantrum. That actually is terrifying to a kid, because what that says to a kid is my intense emotions that feel overwhelming to me, which is why they come out in a tantrum, are actually really overwhelming to other people. They lead my leader to not be able to be sturdy. They essentially, I've said this on Instagram, but it's like if you were screaming because there was turbulence on a plane and you heard your pilot say like, I don't know what to do. Anyone there want to fly the plane? And that was me. I'd be like, forget the turbulence. I'm just terrified that this woman is the pilot. Like, where's my pilot? Like, I'm allowed to be scared, but you're supposed to say, hey, I'm in the cockpit. You're scared. I get it. You haven't been on as many flights as I have. We're still going to land in New York City or wherever you're flying. Then I'd feel safe. So if your kid is running into the street, if your kid is on a play date and they're hitting and you just know as a parent, I'm not being punitive. I just watch their body is out of control. They're going to hit again. They're going to grab. They're going to further identify in that bad kid role. I'm not giving, quote, a second chance, not because I'm trying to take away an experience from my kid, but because I want to protect my kid. I literally just want to, it's an act of love. Mm-hmm. And I would own that to your kid. I'd say, no, we're not going to walk outside again today. Not because you're a bad kid, not because you're in trouble, but because your body's having a hard time stopping itself from doing something dangerous. And when you have a hard time staying safe, you better bet I will always come in and make sure you stay safe. That's how much I love you. You can cry, you can scream. I'll even sit with you while you kind of cry and scream next to me. Those feelings don't scare me and they don't make me change my mind about protecting you. Like, I have the chills. Like, don't we all want to hear that from someone in our life? Like, yeah. Right? It's so stabilizing to a kid.
Yeah. And I think what really comes up for me there is that you are going to sit with them in those big emotions and allow them to have these tantrums. I think this is also something that parents And Chris and I definitely struggle with it, especially because Bash has been such an easygoing kid. He doesn't have very many tantrums, and 3 has been an age, and it's only been a couple of weeks, but I would say like a couple months prior to his 3rd birthday and what we're working through right now, it's like these emotions are coming in. He's had a big transition, and maybe we can talk about transitions after that, but tantrums are coming up. And I'm so thankful for resources like you on Instagram, because I'm like, okay, I need to sit here with this. And this isn't about me. This isn't about my parenting. And he just wants to scream and cry. And I always think about how, like, for me, and ever Chris and I get in a fight, or if ever I need to work through something at work, if I cry, I feel better. It's when I'm not crying that I'm short-tempered and mean and angry. And it's like, I'm not the nicest person to be around. But Chris always is happy when I have a good cry, because he's like, I'm getting my wife back after this.
Totally. Right. So let's put tantrums in context. Then we can talk about transitions and family transitions and why that might result in more tantrums. And I think that'll even become obvious when we really understand, again, first what tantrums are.
Okay.
If I think about the job of a kid in their early years, right, all their childhood, to me, it's like they're preparing to be adults, right? I think that's what we're trying to help our kids do. We're trying to have nice moments with them, of course, but we parent our kids and they're going to be adults for way longer than they're going to be living in our house, hopefully, right? So, and if we think about the emotional preparation an adult needs, and this might sound silly to say it, but no adult gets rid of emotions. Like, kids are frustrated, adults are frustrated. Kids get sad, adults get sad. Kids feel jealous, adults feel jealous. Like, I don't know anyone who came to my private practice and told me like, oh, my parents did such a good job, I never felt jealous, I never felt frustrated after the age of 18, right? No. You have all the feelings. And actually, I think it's really powerful to think about childhood as like practicing those feelings. Because by the time you're 18 or 30 or 50, either you've learned some solid coping mechanisms for those feelings, or you haven't. The feelings are going to be there either way. So either by the time you're 30, you have 30 years of learning how to cope with tough feelings that come your way in life, or you're still at the developmental age of, I don't know, of 2, right? And maybe adult tantrums don't look the exact same as kids, but sometimes they do. They actually look the exact same. Like, you've all probably seen those things, right? So when we think about what we want to do for our kids, it's hard to say we want them to have those tough feelings. They're just inevitably going to happen. We want to prepare them to be able to cope. And you can't learn coping skills for a feeling unless you're going through the tunnel of that feeling. Like, you can't, right? It's why some people who experience intense frustration for kind of the first time ever at age 22, they have a really hard time versus kids who were frustrated, their whole life. They never learned to read in an easy way. I had to work and work and work. And I'm just more prepared to have frustration than the person who everything came easily to.
Right.
So let's come back to then knowing that framework. What is a tantrum? To me, a tantrum is a sign that my kid's feelings overpowered their ability to manage those feelings in the moment, right? And that happens all the time in childhood, because kids come into the world fully able to feel with 0 coping mechanisms in their body really to deal with intense feelings. I would think it's just like a very inconvenient truth. It's like, oh, well, that's inconvenient, right? Because they have the intense feelings and they're just kind of raw.
Right.
So a tantrum in my mind is a kid's way of saying, like, the feelings inside my body felt so big, so unmanageable, or maybe I had a feeling that happened in the moment, but it kind of tipped over the bucket of all the feelings that had built up to that moment, right? Which is why when our kids, I don't know, when we cut their grilled cheese in half and they didn't want it, right? They're so disappointed. Well, all the disappointment of the last day or the last 3 days in my mind has built up. And then it overflows. It literally comes out of their body. It comes out of their extremities with screaming, with flailing, maybe with hitting, right? It actually comes out because they didn't have the skills to kind of manage it inside of them. It didn't have a home anymore. It was just too overpowering. That's what a tantrum is. The problem isn't the behavior, really. The problem isn't even the feelings. The problem is that they haven't yet learned the skills. And the best way kids learn skills to manage tantrums is through something called co-regulation, right? A kid is dysregulated unable to regulate. How does a kid learn that feelings can be managed? Well, they actually don't learn that through a textbook or even right away through some strategy. The first proof they have is that my parent was able to stay calm when I couldn't. That really gives a child evidence, oh, this feeling feels super overwhelming to me, but obviously can get to the point where it is manageable because I'm watching my parent be able to stay calm in my presence. Kids don't learn that when they're sent away to their room. There, they actually learn the opposite. Wow, this feeling is so repulsive. Not only is it overwhelming to me that it comes out of my body in this kind of really violent way, but wow, this feeling also threatens my evolution, threatens my attachment because I was sent away. This feeling is so bad that nobody could even be with me. We think kids learn, no, I just don't like it when you hit me. That's not the lesson kids learn. Kids learn the feeling that led to the hit is unlovable, is unmanageable. And that actually just adds shame to the feeling, which makes the feeling harder to regulate. So forget not learning skills. We've actually kind of dug ourselves even deeper. So what does staying look like? First, and it really goes back to actually the same thing we were saying, Kelly. It always goes back to the same principle, is safety. So I'm not going to let my kid hit me. I'm not going to let them hit someone else. I'm not going to let them throw blocks. And I'm going to use that language. I won't let you hit. That's a kind of set of words I think that every parent has to just commit to their vocabulary. I won't let you. Not, we don't, and not, please stop. Because again, if they could have stopped, they would have stopped, right? I won't let you kind of establishes I'm that pilot on the flight, right? I am your sturdy leader. So my kid is so upset that I cut their grilled cheese, right? Or whatever it seems like in that moment they're upset about. Now they're trying to kick me. I would position their body in a different way. I'd move away or I'd catch their foot. Or if they're trying to hit me, I'd literally catch their wrist and say, I won't let you hit me. I know you're upset. I'm here to help you. Some version of that, right? So I stop the behavior and then I really establish that my kid is a good kid having a hard time, not a bad kid doing bad things through my ability to stay calm, which goes back to kind of our work on ourselves, which is the secret of parenting, that it's all about the work we do with ourselves. Right? Oh, so unfortunate, but it's true. And my ability to see kind of under some quote bad behavior to a good kid who's struggling.
I am going to take, I won't let you with me because it is, I think we don't, and please don't are just common words that I'm using as a parent. And I can see that immediately, but I won't let you feels, I mean, it's so much more control. You just went from being not only the pilot that's flying the plane, but you're ready to land it on the Hudson River because you're in so much control.
That is exactly right. That's exactly right. And I really mean this. It's kind of like a badass thing to say, like when you hear yourself say it, like, and if those aren't words you use, I would encourage anyone listening really to practice in front of the mirror. And I actually often have told clients of mine to voice record themselves saying it because they're like, oh, that sounds so harsh. And then we play it back and they're like, wow, I didn't even believe myself. The way I said, I won't let you sounded like not sturdy at all. And I was like, yeah, okay, that's fine. Like you're building that voice, right? There was a reason you didn't, right? But I won't let you. What it says to your kid actually is, I know you're doing the best you can. I know you're actually having a hard time and I'm not going to let the kind of not so great outcome happen over and over. It establishes that you're the person who's going to stop them. Just like if he was running into the street. Yeah. I can't imagine you'd yell from your house, we don't run into the street. Like if anyone heard you say it, they'd be like, Kelly, go get your kid. Like, what are you doing? Right.
Right.
Like, right. Or please stop. You know, like we would make the stopping happen.
Right.
Because our kid couldn't inhibit. So we have to be the boundary for our kid that they actually can't be for themselves. And after we do that and do other things to build coping skills, our kids start to be able to be that boundary for themselves. But if we're not willing to be it first, well, we can't expect a 3-year-old, like a 6-year-old to suddenly have a skill that they're demonstrating they don't have. I mean, this I could go on forever for about, I won't let you. I feel like there's even ways to do this without even saying the words. I think about my youngest, who's a total boundary pusher, 0 people pleasing in him, that third child of mine. And he's total jokester. So if I let him, we live in an elevator building. He pressed every elevator button, every time, right? And I could tell him, don't press the elevator buttons. He it is, I mean, it's kind of funny. You know,
it's like, hysterical.
It is hysterical.
It's very
right?
annoying as a parent, but so funny from
and
the
I feel
outside.
very rude to the other people. What if there's someone waiting for an elevator and, you know, it's like taking forever to get them. So, you know how I do, I won't let you with him. I just put my body between him and the elevator buttons versus the frustration of, I told you not to, don't press another one. We talked about this. All of that can be avoided. Now, will I practice with him inhibiting an urge at home outside that moment? Oh, pretend you want to touch the couch. How would you stop yourself? Oh, let's play red light, green light. Every time I say red, I want you to, right? You can stop your body. There's even games around inhibition that help with that skill. But when I see that twinkle in his eye, which is every single day of his life, right? I'm not going to allow him to do the behavior that he can't stop, that he hasn't developed that inhibition for yet, that I could stop from the start. And when we say or just do, I won't let you, we're really doing something I think we don't do enough as parents. We're embodying our authority. And as women, that feels really powerful. And we watch our kids respond totally differently to I won't let you, which you then have to follow up often with some type of physicality, not in a hurtful way, but there's physicality in saying, I won't let you throw the block. You probably have to remove the blocks or you have to actually move your child, right? And then after that boundary setting, I think we explicitly want to see the good kid inside. You're having a hard time. That's okay. I'm not going to let you hit because I'm going to show you that these feelings can be felt and managed, right? We're doing that again from a place of love, not from a place of aggression.
So good on the inside, but it's so good as a parent to hear. And, you know, even just thinking of and kind of getting into the nuance of that, like an example for me was I don't go to Costco. I lived in Los Angeles for a really long time. Costco was like in the Valley or in Venice. And I would go to the closest grocery store. I'd have groceries delivered because that just seemed like a lot. And we are more in the suburbs now. And I have access to a Costco. They have humongous grocery carts where two babies can sit in that seat together. Bash loves a hug on his brother that turns into a bit of a chokehold. And so this is like, even just playing it back, like how I responded, I was like, Bash, stop. Like, you need to stop. You can't do that, bud. Stop. I'm trying to use my words. I'm like, okay, I'm grabbing your brother and putting him in the ergo now because you can't stop. In that moment, am I supposed to pull? I know this is nuanced and like trying to get into the details, but like, am I supposed to pull Tashin out and pull his brother away? Or am I supposed to pull Bash away? Because I do want to, like, I guess you say lean in and like time in, not time out. Don't push your child away. Like really like bring them in, the one who's having a hard time regulating. Does it matter if, how I'm responding to that? And is it over right after that? Or what, is it something where like, if you can't do this, we're going to have to leave?
Well, I think you're thinking about it exactly right? Like kind of, if you're having such a hard time somewhere, we're gonna have to make a different set of decisions, right? Because again, I just am not going to let the situation continue. But we're talking about something really dynamic, right? Which we always are with kids, but a 3-year-old's feelings toward their almost 1-year-old sibling, right? Who came in and changed everything about their world. And they're told over and over, they should just love every moment, right? It's like not a fair set of expectations often for our kids. So there's that, right? So I think a lot of kids have these kind of, choke hugs that they do to their younger siblings. And it's kind of this perfect representation of the kind of conflict they have. Like, I love you and I hate you. That's like a really normal, way to feel. I love you and I resent you for being here. They're both equally true. One doesn't have to be more true than the other. I would so be curious though, in Costco, if when he did that, you kind of, even if they were sitting next to each other, just kind of pulled him away or put even like your arm in between your two kids and looked at him and said, I'm not going to let you, whatever it is, touch him in that way, or I'm not going to let you hug him in a way, that could hurt him. Mm-hmm. It's really interesting how many parents say to me, wow, like just saying it that way actually shifted. It's like my kid needed to hear that language, right? Because it felt like it reestablished safety and they actually didn't do it again, or it took much longer before they did it again. Right. So sometimes even that language in and of itself, right? And then maybe a step further, I'm not going to let you hug him in a way that could be hurtful. You look like you have a lot of energy in your body and your hands. Do you want to get out and jump a couple times and sit back in? Do you want to hug him in a different way? Do you have that kind of squeezing feeling in your arms and hands? That's totally fine. Let's find something you can squeeze. What can you squeeze? Here, you can squeeze my handbag. Here, you can squeeze my arm, right? Here, you can squeeze the side. So I think another part of this is so often we tell our kids what to stop doing. But if a behavior often comes from an urge, especially these like intense physical behaviors, then we need to allow the urge to have a different home, right? Again, the urge isn't the problem. The ability to inhibit the urge is the problem. And if the urge could be expressed a different way, right? Imagine if you were having one of those days where like everything went wrong, right? Everything went wrong and you weren't in a kind of I want to cry place. You're in a I want to scream place, right? Like we all have those days, right? And then you're in traffic, right? And like you often don't want to like take a deep breath. You're like, that's like actually not what my body needs. Like I don't want to get home and scream unnecessarily at my kids or my husband. I might just need to let down my window and scream, or I might need to do a kickboxing class. I might need to like kick some stuff right now, right? Yeah. That's not a problem. Actually recognizing I have urge to express aggression is so, that's so sophisticated. And to say, I actually wonder what I can do so I don't end up taking that out on someone where it could be hurtful. I just don't know anyone who would say to a friend, oh, you're going to go to a kickboxing class because you feel a lot of anger instead of yell at your husband. Like, ooh, that's bad. I think I'd be like, that's like so amazing. Like, wow. Right. Yeah. I probably need to do that more often too. So giving him an opportunity to express the urge to squeeze, right? Like that's so helpful. And also you're further establishing the things inside of you, which are feelings and urges, right? The things inside of you are good. The problem isn't the urge. The problem isn't the feeling. Those are good. They're all good. I'm here to coach you and to help you figure out how to do that in a safe way. And I will put a limit up firmly if you, along kind of your pathway of learning, end up doing it in an unsafe way.
You make it sound so easy.
I mean, well, let's just say none of this is like for everyone listening, none of this is easy in real life. And the main reason it's not easy in real life is because we usually weren't kind of parented with both compassion and firmness. Like these things often, I think most people reflect on my family system had a lot more of one and not as much of the other, right? Mm-hmm. And the idea that we can be really, really kind of firm and strong, right? I think there are people in kind of the Good Inside Instagram community who say, you know, I finally got my partner or, you know, my husband or my skeptical mother-in-law to check out your Instagram and they actually really like it. They don't think it's just like too soft. It's because like none of this is soft. Like none of it has to be soft or wishy-washy or no, there's a lot of firmness and there's a lot of strength. Strength can go hand in hand with seeing someone as a good person. Strength can go hand in hand with empathy and compassion and validation, right? And actually when you put those two things together, people feel very held. Like, and that's usually the conditions we're all looking for, right? You want a boss who can say to you, this was not your best work and this is not going to be okay at this company. And I know you can do better. And I know something probably got in the way. So let's figure out what that is because you still have a place here and we want to get the best out of you. I mean, that would be like the best boss ever, right? And that is very firm and very connected.
Right. And that's what I think all parents want is to feel connected. And we feel like we need to be wishy-washy on our boundaries or take things back. And because we're maybe people pleasing or we're trying to be a friend with our kid because we don't want to lose that connection. But what you show time and time again is the connection can be built with these really strong boundaries. And in fact, you're actually creating this safety, these bumpers on their bowling lane to support them to knock as many pins down as possible. And that you aren't, that actually is supportive of them instead.
I love that image. Yeah. Like to be the bumpers, right? Because if their bowling ball goes into outside their lane, that's not good for anybody.
Yeah. No,
right. But that doesn't make them bad. It just means, okay, like I know that I'm going to put up taller bumpers next time and I'm going to bring the ball back, you know?
Right. Well, let's go even further because we can get into a bunch of different topics here. Let's talk about these big transitions. Obviously, Bash wants to choke hold his brother, and it is a beautiful image to think like, I love you and I hate you. This was a huge transition for him. He also went through the big transition of not only getting a brother this year, But being a pandemic kiddo, coming out of like quarantine to like this world of birthday parties and school and community, and it's all been a big transition, like from his first day of school to bringing his brother home to his birthday party, where you're like, he doesn't want them to sing the happy birthday song to him because it all just feels like, some kind of horror movie. Like, so,
Yes.
so how do we support our kids through big transitions? And when should we start talking about these things, and how do we do it?
Great. So I think some general things that come to mind that apply to everything you said, and I would imagine most transitions, is number one, we can only learn to regulate the feelings we allow ourselves to have. Right. So if regulating a feeling, really, it's like fancy language for learning to manage a feeling, involves having a feeling, allowing it to be in your body, and then figuring out what to do with it. The next step is that kids only allow themselves to have feelings that their parents give themselves permission to have, because that's a kid's kind of primary job, is to make sure they fit in and can survive in their family. So learn family rules and adapt accordingly, right? So how does that apply to transitions? So often we just don't prepare our kids for the range of feelings they're going to have about transitions. Like every transition has a range of feelings. With anything new, there's loss. With anything new, there's usually apprehension, right? And we often want to paint this picture of, this is going to be amazing. Oh, you're going to go to school. It's going to be amazing. I have a new sister. It's going to be amazing. You're going to a birthday party. You've missed that. That's going to be amazing. And if you go back to the idea of we can only regulate a feeling we allow ourselves to have, and kids can really only allow themselves to have feelings their parents give them permission to have, then what happens when a kid feels nervous? Now that nervousness is going to explode out of their body and take over because they don't know how to regulate it. What happens when they feel angry for having a sibling? Well, the only way that anger could come out is in a hit, because that's a dysregulated feeling, right? So I know it sounds like, and I think parents are like, am I putting this idea in my kid's head? I don't believe we put feelings into kids' body. I just think that the feelings are there. So for example, with a sibling, like if you're pregnant, I think it's really important to tell your older kid, you're probably going to have a lot of different feelings about becoming a big brother. Maybe I'd go further. It's okay if part of you feels excited, part of you feels mad, part of you feels sad, part of you feels confused. Mommy has all of those feelings too. So we're kind of going to figure this out together. So I think a parent's fear is, what? Like, what if my kid doesn't feel that way? To me, we just don't give kids enough credit. Like, why wouldn't they feel that way? They are in a life. They are used to something that's familiar, and we are changing everything about that. I don't know anyone who changes something familiar into something unfamiliar and only have like pleasant feelings. Like things that are new are inherently uncomfortable. So whenever you do something new, which is always in a transition, it's going to be uncomfortable, right? So the other thing is like, I can't imagine we'd say about our 25-year-old kids, I was used to a job and then I walked in and everything about it changed, but no big deal. I didn't even notice and I don't even have a reaction. All good. Like I would be like, what? Are you not like a human? Like, what did I would actually think I did something wrong. I'd be like, how did you not notice that? So we want our kids to notice changes when they're older. We want them to have a range of reactions. That starts with tolerating it early on. So when you're thinking about a new kid in the family, when you're thinking about going to birthday parties after not going to birthday parties, talking about a range of feelings your kid's going to have in advance of that transition is some of the best preparation we can give our kids. So what would that sound like with the birthday party? You haven't been to a big group gathering in a while, right? And then maybe I'd get out stuffed animals or, something to make it real for a kid, or trucks if they like trucks, and say, oh, what is it going to be when there's this person and that person and this person? Oh, and they're going to be so close. I can imagine having trucks and like rolling them together. And interesting, last year we kind of said happy birthday. And this year with all those voices, it might be like happy birthday. And I'd get really, really loud. Oh, that's going to be really different. I wonder what that's going to be like for you. That question, I wonder what it's going to be like for you. I think people often say to me, like, do you think my 2-year-old can answer that? Do you think my 3-year-old can answer that? We don't ask kids questions so they can get answers. I believe we ask kids questions so they can get to the practice of asking themselves questions. Because I think we all know as an adult, if we say to ourselves, what is that going to be like for me in advance? We are a million times more prepared. Not because we say, oh, I know it's going to be awful, but because we start wondering about it. So we want our kids to practice asking themselves questions. So let's go a step further, right? Then I'd get specific, especially with a new sibling, right? Telling kids what siblings are really like in the beginning, what babies are really like, is important, right? Do you know babies don't do much but cry and eat? And same with telling them what it's going to be like for you. So I think a lot of times I see parents who are home a lot, right? Even maybe they're working moms and now they're home, and their kid understandably has a fantasy of like all this time with mom. And instead, mom's napping, mom's breastfeeding, mom's bottle feeding, mom's not available. And then we get mad at our kids for like screaming to trying to get our attention, or right. But preparing them for that, being really specific. So when you get home from school, it'll be different. Mom's going to be here, but I might be napping. What would that be like if you come in and you want to see me and I'm not available? That might be a little tricky, right? So I'm really building skills in advance. So when these moments come, my child is that much more prepared to manage them because we've talked about them. Mm-hmm. I think the same thing can be true for a school transition. What is it going to be like to say bye to mom when you go to school? Oh, we have a drop-off play date. We haven't had that in a while. Oh, let's practice that goodbye. What might happen? Because then if I think my kid might be nervous, I can practice a routine in advance. I can maybe come up with a little mantra. I'm safe. Mommy always comes back. We could practice that in advance. I've actually built skills my kid needs because I've been willing to see the kind of difficult emotional experience that might accompany that transition.
It's funny because you mentioned that people maybe in your community feel like if you're talking about all these emotions that come up for a child or all these normal human feelings, that you might be putting ideas in their head that then they'll turn around and say, well, I am frustrated, or I am upset, or I am jealous. And I will actually say that following your Instagram and some of the other parenting Instagrams and just going into those emotions head on, it's actually prevented a bunch of tantrums in our family and allowed for Sebastian to have the vocabulary to say what he's feeling. And to hear, a 2.5-year-old say the word frustrated is also very cute. So cute. But it is, I don't know if it's the way that we were raised to avoid those type of feelings and that those feelings weren't okay. And so we don't want to, there is this reaction to say, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to role play it. I don't want to practice it. I just want to say everything is awesome because that's the way I want it to be all the time, but it isn't always that way all the time. And so the drop off and like go quickly because the teacher wants you to drop them off and go quickly, even when they're having these big emotions, like those transitions are really hard. So I mean, it's like we're preaching to the choir only because I've gone through that and seen that even though it is hard and uncomfortable to practice the drop off or to talk about the feelings and give them vocabulary, it's actually proven in our family to lower the number of tantrums that we've seen Sebastian have, and to have him be the first one to tell us how he's feeling. And I don't know, even to the point of like asking for special time with me, that's something that we've started to create to try and like allow for him not to have these jealous, frustrated feelings about his brother, because it's true. In the beginning, it was like, I'm keeping your brother Toshin alive. We're both sleeping. We're both trying to eat something and I'm here all the time. And that's really frustrating for him.
Yeah. Right. And I think going back to that idea of like, oh, I just want everything to be amazing. Again, I think when we just step back and look forward, I don't think any of us think our kids' lives from 18 and up are going to be amazing all the time. Mm-hmm. Like it's not really appropriate to be happy all the time. It's not appropriate to be happy when, you have a breakup with someone you are close with. It's not appropriate to be happy. Even like, oh, I wanted to get into that college course and I was closed out. Like, why would you be happy? Right. And if we want our kid to be able to manage the feelings that naturally come up as a human, then we really have to stop seeing the feelings as the problem and wishing away the feelings, and instead thinking about building skills for those feelings, right? The reason special time with kids, one-on-one time, helps so much, right? And no matter what the problem is, especially if there's sibling dynamic issues or sibling jealousy, isn't because it gets rid of jealousy, but it helps a kid build a different feeling. Oh, I'm secure in my family. My individual needs will get met. I am still special. That doesn't make the jealousy go away, but it helps the jealousy be managed because it has a little bit of a counterpart in feeling secure, right?
Absolutely. Something that you talk about, and I think it's been a theme throughout this whole call, is to promote and take an active part in de-shaming our behavior and our children's behavior, what's happening in our household. And you talk about this online a lot. I'd love for you to explain this like theme, and it's like bringing this into our families, and how can we get rid of the shame?
Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up because it is something that's so important. It's like truly one of my foundational principles is like, how can we constantly be de-shaming, not just when shame comes up, but like, how can we proactively de-shame before the thing even like rears its head, right? So let's think about what shame is. Again, have to kind of understand before we intervene. So the way I think about shame is through an attachment lens. The way I think about kids around people is always through an attachment lens. And shame is a feeling we have, and it started early on in our childhoods, when essentially we learned this part of me is not connectable to others. This part of me does not get secure, loving, safe attachment. Goes back to what we even talk about with like behavior and timeouts and why I'm not a fan of those things. Because shame when we're young is a really adaptive emotion. It's adaptive. Right? Like everything is adaptive, but shame too. Because if you knew, let's say that when I'm disappointed, if I cry in my family, if I show emotion, kind of again, when I'm on that point of the pathway of learning how to manage emotions, I got met with pull up your bootstraps, or we don't cry, stop being a baby, or go to your room, come out when you put a smile on your face. Okay. Let's say that was the type of house you lived in. Then the next time you felt like crying when you were disappointed, it would be really adaptive for shame, which stops you, to come up because that's trying to protect you from what feels worse than being disappointed, which is feeling disappointed and being actively rejected by the adult you want comfort from. So if shame would essentially develop a voice inside you that says, don't do that, Kelly, or Becky, don't do that. Like that's bad. If we could shame ourselves into stopping expression, that actually is helpful as a kid because it stops you from getting hurt. Okay. Fast forward, right? So we've encoded shame, even though I think we all learn by the time we're older, wait, my family of origin isn't perfectly representative of the world. Like, right? Mm-hmm. It takes us a while to learn it. Wait, like not everyone responds to things in this way, but it's hard to unlearn that. Shame becomes the things then that were really encoded in aloneness. Because if you were crying when you were disappointed, and you had to learn to shame the feeling because you know it would have gotten rejected, then you feel totally alone. You're like, this thing isn't connectable to others, right? And connection is how we survive as humans. We're a species that's relational. Okay. Now, how do we bring this to our kids? Shame is the thing that shuts down, right? So when you say to your kid, come on, we really have to do your math homework, and you just watch them like shut down, they feel alone. They feel alone in what? Probably in the experience of struggling, in the experience of not understanding something, in the experience of feeling confused or making a mistake, right? I think there's inherent shame almost in being a kid because your parents are so freaking capable at so many things you're not capable of that you think you're the only one, right? If you think about a kid's first 20 minutes, like trying to put on pants, brushing their teeth, reaching something, all things that they're kind of alone in, right? So what does de-shaming your house look like? I think there's a couple ways we can always do this. Number one is just proactively modeling mistakes is de-shaming your house, right? So, I burned the garlic, or, I can't believe I put my shirt on backwards. Happens. Okay. Everyone makes mistakes. I'm de-shaming something that often has a lot of shame for kids, which is making a mistake. Why does that have so much shame? Because often kids watch their parents be so capable. How else can we de-shame our house constantly? Is telling our kids stories of struggling from our childhood, right? So let's say my kid is learning to tie their shoes. Right? It can be an intense moment of frustration between parents and kids, right? Why? Because there's actually a lot of shame for a kid often there, right? So what might I do? When my kid's like, I didn't oh, it didn't work, right? We want to say, just try it again. Like, you know how to do it. Shame, shame, shame versus a de-shaming interaction would actually look like just saying, oh, I remember learning how to tie my shoe when I was about your age. It took me so many tries. Actually, I don't even think I tried to learn it when I was your age. I think I was a lot older. Wow. So cool that you're even trying. I haven't, quote, given my kid a skill for tying their shoe. I've given my kid in my mind a skill that's much more important in life, which is just feeling less alone, feeling like it's okay to struggle. And I would bet a ton of money that a kid would be more likely to try it again, just hearing that story, than if I say, hold the right loop tighter when you wrap the other one around.
Oh, it's so sweet. And it's such a strong connection that you're building with your child. And I think you're building an even more important skill. Like you said, you're building resilience. You're building this, like, it's okay. Everything's always okay. We figure it out. We try again. And if it's not okay, it's okay that it's not okay. It's okay that you're frustrated. Like,
that's exactly right.
Wrap me in this feeling of goodness.
Yes. Right. Like, frustration tolerance it's like one of the most important things to build, right? And we know this as adults too. It's not just important to learn how to read. Like, what's important as an adult to be able to like reach your goals in life is tolerating the frustration of getting there. And I think what you said that really resonates with me is this idea of resilience. Like, it's kind of like, it's okay to be me in this moment. That's what enables someone to be resilient. Like, it's okay to be me who can't tie their shoes yet. It's okay to be me trying to pronounce this word and not being able to figure it out, even if someone else next to me in class is already reading, more fluidly. It's okay to be me. And this goes back to attachment and aloneness. When it's okay to be you, when you feel like someone else is kind of in that with you. And that's the irony. It's always easier to feel okay with yourself when you don't feel alone. That's the opposite of shame. The opposite of shame is connection. And so de-shaming our house, especially proactively, I think even just asking ourselves now, what does my kid really struggle with? And I think this is such a powerful strategy, especially when our kid struggles with something that they shut down about when we try to talk to them about it. Hey, I just want to talk to you about the math thing. And they're like, don't talk to me about math. It's just like, what a kid is really saying is this is too hot and I feel too much shame that like when you even get a little bit close, I make you go away. When my kids, and of course, they're normal kids too, they struggle with a million different things. But when my kids are in a stage of really struggling with something, and I feel like it's hard for me to have an entry point, I really almost always like follow a formula. How can I make their real internal struggle my struggle and model that in my adult life, or share with them stories of when I struggled with something similar when I was their age, right? So, let's say your child's struggling to learn how to read. Right? They don't need your help with phonics. They really don't. Not from a parent. The attachment is too intense. They're looking for your approval. They feel alone. That overrides any ability to learn that skill from you, especially if they're shame, right? So what's going to help my kid is actually if I read out loud some books to them and fumble some words. Oh my goodness, I'm an adult. Wow, that was a tricky word. I just was reading too fast. Okay, sorry. What page are you on? We're here. And keep reading. Now, if I look at my kid and say, see, adults make mistakes too, I've taken away all the power of that moment. So please, anyone listening, do not do that. You've done this beautiful intervention. Just trust that it speaks for itself, right? Or for you, Kelly, okay? So something I do with my kids starting from when they're very young, way before they can read and write, is I make mistakes in writing and reading then, like built in from the beginning, right? So the other day I was playing with my son and he asked me to write fire station. He was building a Magtile fire station, and he's like, can you write fire station? He's 4, right? So I said, sure, no problem. So I went to the other area and I brought it back. I had things I crossed out. I had letters that were backward. I purposely made it imperfect. And then I showed it to him and I kind of said, yeah, that was like hard and made some mistakes along the way. And then I said this to him, right? I said, if it's perfect, you can't learn. If it's perfect, you can't learn. What was so interesting is a couple minutes later, I was just watching him build and something got messed up, a piece fell. And you know what he said out loud with the same jingle? He goes, if it's perfect, you can't learn. If it's like, he literally said it because our kids are always internalizing what we're saying. So you can proactively de-shame so many moments by just building in imperfection, by modeling, right? By sharing stories. Oh, did I ever tell you about when I was the slowest kid in class? Do you know we had a running race? Guess who got last place? Guess who? Your mom. Total last. Oh, and then I like to play with my kids around that. I'll say, how do you think I handled that? Do you think I just like in kindergarten, just took a deep breath and like, no big deal? And usually they're like, probably. I'll be like, no. Do you know I? And then I'll like act it out. I'm like, no, I did this. And I like fell to the floor and I'm like, no, and I'll model something that would be human. And actually, I'm making it less likely that my child's going to have that reaction going forward. Why? Because when the moment comes where they're last place, I could cry thinking about this. They're not alone in their body. They've already encoded mom being last place. And so the moment is immediately more manageable because I've de-shamed through my own experience. I could cry.
If it's perfect, you can't learn. I mean, that is just, it's so human. And I think what our children see is exactly what you said. They see this perfection. They see, the good news is that I can't spell and my grammar's horrible anyway. So
you're ahead of the game.
I'm modeling that left and right, but maybe I'll mess up in counting and maybe I'll show them that I can't, that I don't understand a little bit of science here and there and that there's something that's really hard for me. Or just even talking about like what might feel a little easier, what might feel a little harder. I love that formula because it's so good. And it's so easy for us to forget to show our humanness, and to be reminded to do that is so powerful in parenting. Oh,
and let me double down on that kind of in a meta way almost here, because I know I do this thing where I'll like share ideas and I'm so passionate about all this, and everyone, this amazing community, like just inspires me so much. But then I forget to say something really important, that like my kids do not have Dr. Becky as mom. Yes, I really did that moment, that fire station thing with my kid. But like, I don't do that all the time. I yell at my kids. I've called my kids names I wish I didn't, right? I have no patience. I'm on my phone with them when I shouldn't be on my phone, right? So I think it's, it's easy, I know, for someone to hear like, oh, I feel alone as a parent listening to someone talk about parenting, because it makes me feel like, oh, I'm not doing what they're doing. But my husband always jokes that he wants to tag my personal Instagram account in my Dr. Becky post, because he's like, you would love what this woman's saying. Like, you should try that sometimes. Because I'm totally not doing this all the time with my own kids either. So I just want to, I'm sure you don't do all the like food related things that you hear yourself talk about. No, of course not.
I think, well, and I think that Instagram is so interesting. And I've now looking back, I've been on it for my business for almost a decade. So it's a very long time. And what I sometimes hear is like, we don't see when you like have the donut, or when you don't have the smoothie in the morning and it's 1 p.m. and you're kind of like,
pizza.
Both fridge doors are open, both pantry doors are open, and you're going like, don't talk to me. I need I need food. Like I do. I love that you're bringing the humanness in with your children, because especially with social media, like, and they're going to grow up with social media that we didn't have. There is so much fake perfectionism out there that they're needing to like keep up with or compete with. And that like makes me sick to my stomach thinking about how they're going to be raised, and that they have this. But it also, it allows for us to maybe look and reflect and say, like, how am I showing more humanness in my own approach to Instagram, or my own approach to parenting, or my own approach to my relationships with my friends and other moms? Like, I mean, I don't know what it is about being on Instagram or like having a large following. I think people think, oh, if she knows about blood sugar, she's going to know about parenting. Like I may be a quote unquote expert in blood sugar, but I am not an expert in parenting, and I am not an expert in a huge variety of things, and I'm learning. And so I just am so thankful for people like you for giving people some tools, like parents specifically, like just thinking about getting started with Bash. I can credit so many people for supporting my parenting journey, and you being one of those. Like so many gold nuggets today. I mean, I've taken notes. I won't let you if it's perfect, you can't learn. Like, these are things that I'm going to take into just my life with fashion. I'm not going to do it all the time, and neither are you. But if I do it 80% of the time, I'm good on the inside, and I'm trying my best with the resources I have.
That's everything. And if you're doing it 80% of the time, you're doing way more than I am. So
no, I mean,
let me know your secret.
Like whatever is
Totally.
normal if it's practice. And I think that's the practice
Yes.
piece. Like the practice piece of just looking back at like some of the Whole Brain Child and some of those books that I know that you recommend for people too, is just acknowledging, like seeing Vash and saying like, I see that you're frustrated. Like even just, that was something I never did. And then once I learned that language, like I diffused so many tantrums with that language. And that's not I just learned that from someone else. And what I'm learning from you today is going to be priceless in like raising my children. So thank you for your time today. Thank you for sharing these amazing tips with our audience. Like I told you earlier, I was so looking forward to this podcast to share some personal things and to get your advice, but to really just have these tools that are making me a better parent. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for what you share online. Like I could talk to you forever. I know I've taken up so much of your time, but where can people follow along? Where can they take your courses? Where can they contact you if they want privates in New York? Like give us all the details.
Yeah. So goodinside.com. It's easy enough to remember and it'll feel good to visit, right? Is kind of the hub for everything. My Instagram is Dr. Becky at Goodinside. You can also get to that from goodinside.com. I have a weekly email that's truly just strategies and scripts delivered to your inbox every Thursday. We call that Good Insider. You can get that at goodinside.com. My podcast is Good Inside with Dr. Becky. I answer real parents' questions who leave me voicemails, and that's usually the basis for each episode. And then I do have a bunch of kind of deeper dive workshops where we can really focus on one issue. And I think you know this, right? And I would even leave listeners with this, but I have almost as many workshops for adults, whether you have kids or not, as I do aimed at parenting issues, right? So yes, I have a sleep workshop that really rethinks why kids aren't sleeping, a potty workshop and handbook that has a very, I think, different approach that really comes from respecting a kid's body and leads to better results, all of that stuff, problem behaviors. But I also have a course for adults on managing stress, couples communication workshop, it's never too late workshop. And then probably one of my more popular one, a reparenting workshop, right? Because all these things we're talking about today, how I approach frustration, if it's perfect, I can't learn. These are things that like the more we think about giving those tools to ourselves, they're going to naturally flow out of us when we're with our kids. So I tell all parents that the first thing to do after this, I think, this episode isn't to tell yourself, I'm going to do this with my kid right away, right? I don't know. I always feel like it feels like a lot of pressure, but I'd say what resonated and how do I apply that to myself first? And that's where real intergenerational change starts. So can I label a behavior that I didn't like in myself? Oh, I, wasn't so nice to that friend. And then say, I wonder what was going on given I'm good inside and I'm doing the best. Oh, I have felt really resentful of her, I don't know, over the last little bit, or I have felt left down. Maybe I turned that around. And really activating curiosity and compassion under our own behaviors is really how we can do that in an ongoing way with our kids.
Just like, I want to share this with more than just my podcast audience. How do I get this out there to everyone and all the moms and dads? Well, I will put all of the links to everything from goodinside.com to your Good Insider, your Instagram, and all of your workshops on the show notes on my website. And we'll share it on IGTV so that people can hear all of the goodness that you are sharing. So Dr. Becky, thank you so much for being here and for putting yourself out there. I know that having opinions about parenting, it can sometimes be a hot topic and lots of disputes. So thank you for continuing to have the confidence and the security in yourself as a parent and as a practitioner to share these strategies, because I know as much as you do, the more that you grow and the more that people fight back or have negative things to say, and it can make us shut down. So thank you for never shutting down.
Oh, I don't think anyone's ever said that to me, and that really hits me deep. So thank you, Kelly. This was awesome and can't wait for our next conversation.
Let's do it.
Thank you for listening to Be Well by Kelly. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Learn more at BeWellByKelly.com and follow me on Instagram at BeWellByKelly. I would love if you picked up my books, Body Love and Body Love Every Day. They're sold on Amazon and at all major booksellers.